Looking at circle theorems now, before we actually start the circle theorem proofs, what's the circle theorem? Well, circle theorems are sets of rules that we can use to show or prove why certain angles are what they are. They're the same as, for example, rules of angles in a triangle, angles in a polygon, except this time we're looking at things that involve a circle. By the end of this topic, you're going to be able to figure out angle X, for example. You're going to figure out angle X there or angle Z there. Straight away, you can probably, you'll be able to do these questions in your head, most of these. Now, before we get to the theorems and proofs, where there's two properties that you need to know. So the first property you're going to need to know is a triangle that is formed, or a triangle that's created by two radii and a chord will always be an isosceles triangle. So here's an example. You can see there's two radii and then there's a chord. This triangle is always going to be isosceles no matter how I rearrange these points. Now, the important thing is it has to be the radii. So in this case, it's not the radii. This is not a radii, so they're not the same. Now, I could strategically find a point where that is an isosceles triangle, but generally you can't just assume it's an isosceles triangle. So two radii and a chord will always make an isosceles triangle. This is going to be crucial to practically every one of the proofs that we look at. The second theorem that we need to know about, the property that we need to know about is an angle between a tangent and a radius is not always 90 degrees. So here's an example. So you can see this is a tangent. It's touching the circle at one point. So that's the definition of a tangent. Now, if it wasn't touching the circle at one point, you can see if it's touching it at 2 points, that's not 90 degrees. If I keep moving the tangent, move it along, you can see eventually it only touches at 1 point, and now we have a tangent. So that angle has to be 90 degrees if the red line is a tangent, and vice versa. If the red line is a tangent, then the angle has to be 90 degrees. So when we get to the next set of videos, I'm going to start showing you the theorems. There's a few things that you're going to realize that are very, very common to all of the questions. And knowing these things is going to make you a lot better at the topic. The first of all is use isosceles triangles. And that means using radii when you can. If you're ever stuck, that's usually one of the key things to fall back on. Look for common sides. This will again make more sense when you have shapes next to each other that share a side. Congruent triangles, so is one of the previous topics we did, that will come up at various points. We might need to use that to prove something is true. And then this is the odd thing about this topic is once I prove the first couple of theorems to you, you can use those theorems to then back up any statements for later theorems. So when we get to the fifth theorem, if I then say, oh, well, this is true because of the first theorem I showed you, you then don't have to go back and prove the first theorem again from scratch. And you'll see that will again make more sense when I do those examples with you. That should be enough for you guys to get started. Watch the videos carefully, and I'm going to share a Google Doc which you can access, and it's just going to summarize the topic and have links to interactive tasks that you can do to kind of play around with circles and angles. Just like Desmos is for graphs, there's a thing called GeoGebra, which you can use for geometry, and you can then play around with the circle theorems. If you do that, you just consolidate your understanding so much better. And then when you get to the questions, which are obviously flat 2D printed on paper, you're going to be able to imagine and kind of figure out the angles from the theorems that we've done a lot more easier than not doing the task. So look out for the Google Doc that I'm going to share with the post. Okay, I'll see you in the next video.